Okay, welcome to this Friday brunch Dharma talk, 24th of April. We've been talking about the different stages of dependent origination. Now, at the stage where you have dependent on feeling, craving arises. Depending on craving, clinging arises. Clinging, as I've said before, is similar to attachment, to holding on to. Now, what is this craving that is dependent on feeling? Now, when we feel something, we usually feel like or dislike. When we like something, we want something. When we dislike something, we don't want something or somebody. So when we like something, we desire for it. And that desire is craving. That not wanting, not desiring, not wanting is aversion. Pushing things away. Don't want to be near the things. Aversion. Now craving arises due to feeling. Now this wanting will grow, this desiring will grow, this craving will grow. And it is suffering when we do not get what we want. So this constant craving causes the suffering. It's the same thing with aversion. This constant aversion, we are in a place where we do not want to be. Now that aversion also causes suffering. So the two opposites, not wanting and wanting. Now so long as that craving is not satisfied, so long as that craving do not cease, we continue to suffer. We continue to suffer mentally. You all know what craving is like. You've experienced it before. Children knows what craving are like, especially little children. When they have craving, you can see it in them. You can see them crying. You can see them demanding for something, demanding that they do not want to be, they do not want to do things. They have an aversion to it. You can really see it in children. But in ourselves, we can also see it. This craving for things. But once we have this thing, we attach to it, and that's when the suffering ceases. Right? When we get it, we hold on to it, and then you can say that's a little pleasure that comes from this attachment. When the craving ceases, when we let it cease, it doesn't go to attachment. There's kind of relief. There's a kind of peace when you get. When the craving ceases. So we can identify that the immediate cause of one thing, craving around, the immediate result of craving is suffering. The immediate result of aversion is also suffering. So when you get your things, you become attached to it. Now there is another thing which is similar to craving, but it is not craving. It's called chanda, desire to do. That's the thing. The desire to do something, the desire to act. And it's called chanda. Now this is different from craving. This is wholesome. Now we desire to do something good. Right? And that comes from skillfulness. We know this is a good thing to do. We desire to offer dana. Right? Right? We desire to do dana. Right? That's chanda. Right? That's different. That's skillfulness. We desire to help people. Charity. We desire to do things because it is a good thing to do. Now, when we start with working meditation, we start with a lot of aversion. Why should I do this? What's the benefit of doing this? You know? Then slowly, when we do our working meditation correctly, we find out, yes, there is happiness in it. There's joy in doing it. Right? And there's only the doing, the only working meditation. There's no end result in it. Right? When you're washing the plates or when you're wiping the floor, you are just in the act of washing the plate or cleaning the floor. Right? And there is this desire to clean the whole floor. There is the desire to wash the plate. There's desire to wash the plate cleanly. There's the desire to clean the floor, all the floor. All that chanda, desire to do. Right? There is no, when we do this thing, we are only in the act of doing this thing. We are not going after the results, getting something. When we are doing something without expecting any result, then it's just desire to do. And that's wholesome. So when we have the desire to go on the path, it may start with craving. When we desire to practice meditation, when we have the desire to investigate Dharma. Now all these are chanda, all these are wholesome. In the beginning they may be craving, but once we discover the joy, when we discover the bliss, the peace that accompanied this desire to do, that itself becomes skillful. When we offer dana, we feel happiness. That comes from mudita, joy in the joy of others. So we have to learn to separate the difference between craving, which is tanha, and chanda, which is just desire to do. Right? When there is a result, when we want a result, when we are going after the result, that is craving. When we go and help somebody, that's just the desire to do, that chanda, without expecting anything in return. We see somebody needing help, we just go and help, because we know it's a skillful thing to do. So we start from a skillful thought. We do not start from one thing. We do not start from, I want this, craving. This particular thing. Now all this starts from feeling. Depending on feeling, craving arises. Depending on craving, clinging arises. Now we're going to look at feeling. We do everything due to feelings. We have a good feeling. We want it. It's a bad feeling. We do not want it. We like something and that leads to craving if we don't check it. We dislike something and that leads to aversion. We are an emotional being. We are driven by the emotions of feeling. Now, at every stage of this dependent origination, we are driven by the emotions of feeling. In the beginning, depending on contact, this feeling of like and dislike arises. And then when we proceed, it goes into craving, tanha. And in that stage, the feeling intensifies. It becomes craving and aversion. Much stronger. We still can let it cease. We don't let it go on to attachment or clinging. When we come to the stage of clinging, attachment, and even more stronger emotion arises. That is hate and love. We come to hate somebody, you come to hate something. There are people we hate, there are things we hate. We come to love something. We come to be attached to somebody. So this hurt, love and hate operate at this thing. Now when we are at this stage, we could break the 5 precepts, depending on how strong it is. Right? That's quite an advanced stage of emotional feeling. And the last stage is becoming. And in the stage of becoming, the 2 greatest emotions is fear and addiction. When we have fear and we have addiction, we definitely break the 5 precepts. We no longer have control over it. As soon as we fear, we defend ourselves. As soon as we fear, we kill something before it bites us, or before it kills us. We react at that stage. When we are addicted to gambling, we got to find some more money. We steal money to gamble. When we are addicted to alcohol, drugs, we have to find the money to feed our addiction. When we are addicted to a person, we do everything, revenge or whatever, to get back. So when it has become fear, when it has become addiction, that's when you really have to seek professional help. Right? But if you are practicing for a long time, you can help yourself. It depends on the intensity of that fear, the intensity of that addiction. So we are an emotional being. So we all start from like and dislike to addiction and fear. That's the status. It all depends on what stage we are. In likes and dislikes, we still have a very good chance of saying, yeah, I can let go of it, I don't have to take it. I don't have to be averse to it. So at the early stages, you have a choice. But when it comes to attachment, and especially when it comes to becoming, you don't have a choice. It is not us, people alone, right? It is the whole society as well. It's nation, the politics of fear, politics of addiction, consumerism. Right? So it is the fear of another nation that drives people to go to war. It is also the addiction to the things we need, oil, energy, right? The nation goes to war. From history, in our history we know, that countries invade another countries because they are addicted to the materials that they can get. Whether it be tea, cotton, iron, whatever. They need it for the society to progress. Fear is irrational. You see, when we see this pandemic starting, when there is a pandemic, the people are not fearful of this COVID-19, but they are fearful of not having toilet papers. Now, where did that come from? It's irrational. Every supermarket runs out of toilet papers. Fear of not having toilet papers. Fear of not having enough food. And then they have to throw away the food after 3 days. So that's what fear drives people to do. And how do we progress from one stage to another? It is when we have this feeling of light, or have this feeling of this light, and that fits into, that emotion fits into our thinking. And our thinking in that particular way, no other way, how much we like this thing, how much we dislike this thing, then it turns into craving, turns to aversion. And then further thinking on this thing turns it into attachment, turning into love. Or in aversion, it turns it into hate. When we continue with that thinking, it turns into fear. What we hate turns into fear. The fear comes from the reaction. What we love, we continue to think about it, it becomes an addiction. So all this process comes to our consuming it, consuming our life, consuming our craving, consuming our love for it, it becomes addiction. Consuming our dislike, it becomes an aversion. Keep on consuming our dislike, it becomes hate. Keep on consuming the hate, it becomes fear. Now when we consume it, it is our mind that takes it in. Keep on taking it, and it grows. Nothing else. Things are physical or mental. Things a human being are both mental and physical. But when it enters our heart, they are all only mental. So we know the dangers of consuming, So we want to let it cease. We do not want to consume it anymore. We want to let it go. Right? At every stage. Whatever stage we are, we want to let it go. But when we are in the state of becoming, we have to cure ourselves. We have become. Right? But at other stages, we can still let go before it goes to another stage. Now we come to the first question. Where does all this like and dislike comes from? Where did it originate? Where is the starting point? The starting point is contact. And the first point of contact is the first point of impression. The first impression is important. We have been told, you have heard of it before. But why is first impression important? Because the first time we come into contact with something, we do not know what it is. We have to build an identity of what it is. And the first information we get is our first impression of this. We come to it in several ways. We see something. We hear something. We don't know. We ask somebody. Then people tell us what we is. We have no way to judge whether it's right or wrong. So we take it in. So let's start our basis. That's the basis of how we build our identity. Right? We don't have information. That's the first impression, is the information that we get. And where do we get all our first impressions? It's from our parents. First impressions we get are from our parents. They are the one who teach us. Right? So whatever our impressions are, our first impressions are, that comes from our present. And later on, when we have our own mind, we can think logically, we can reason logically, we can get other sources of information. We are open-minded, then we change those impressions. We change our identity. For those who do not investigate their identity, for those who are not open-minded, for those who hold on to what they've been taught, for those who don't investigate the truth of what they are seeing, experiencing, then their first impression stays. That identity stays. So being open-minded, getting other information, listening to other people, investigating, that's the only way when we can come to an identity that is reasonable, that is not biased, that is not prejudiced. So our parents, our teachers, the book we read, the society we live in, those are the things that conditions our identity. Conditions what we like and what we don't like. And that's where the feeling comes from. It comes from the impressions. from the things we put into our identity. Now, recently, with the invention of the internet, when the internet is available, when there's so much stuff that's in the world, we have another class of people, they are called influencers. They are very important to people who want to sell you things. And these people are correctly named influencers because they influence people. We don't know whether this is better than that or not. Which toys is good for my 7-year-old during Christmas. So these influencers will tell us, they give us a view, right? So they influence us, right? Because there's so much stuff in the world we don't know. So these people play a role. They play a role in telling us what things are. But at the same time, they influence us just by telling us. And especially when we have a trust in them, they become influencers. They determine what they buy. They determine what we buy, what their supporters. And there exists an influencer throughout time. But most people do not know. And who are they? They are religious people. They are monks. They are priests. Right? These people are influencers as well. They are good influencers and they are bad influences. So if you happen to follow a good influencer, then your views become right. If you follow a bad influencer, then you have a distorted view, which isn't right. So it's important who you listen to. Every time you listen to somebody, you take in what they say. And that becomes part of your view. That becomes part of how you see the world. And that determines your feeling towards things. So you can see all the hate in the world. And where did it come from? It comes from their own perception of things, your own perception of the world, your own perception of people. It doesn't come from themselves. It comes from influences. Now the world is getting worse as there are more information, there are more influence, there are lots of fake news, there are lots of fake events, there are lots of fake objects. Right? And that confuses us. We do not know which is real, which is fake, and they affect your view. So when you come to these things, you understand on your principle. You want to stand on what you know is right. You do not want it to affect your feelings. Because feelings is what drives you. When you like something, you go towards it. When you dislike something, you go away from it. So if somebody says, Bhante Kovido is bad, don't go near to him, and that of course affects your feeling. If somebody says, Bhante Kovido is good, and that affects your feeling. And it affects the way you choose. Yeah. So between somebody you like and somebody you don't like, you definitely choose somebody you like. See? Minimally, even somebody you like a little bit, somebody you don't dislike a little bit, you choose somebody you like. Simple as that. See? So you want to hold on, to what you know. So when something that comes, when you hear something, when you see something, you want to be aware. You do not want to take it. When you see something or hear something that's wrong, you want to say, this is not right, this is wrong, this is not what I know. You have to say it internally, so it doesn't affect you. When you're not sure, you have to say, this is not sure. If you don't say it to yourself internally, it is not sure. It seeps into you. Why? Because you recollect it. Right? Somebody says this, it disturbs you, you're not sure. And when you recollect it, it becomes part of you. It becomes part of your view. So when you say it's not sure, then you will not recollect. Right? So whatever you come to these days, you have to internally make a decision. You don't have to tell somebody, but you have to tell yourself. You have to tell your heart. You have to filter right views from wrong views before it enters your heart. But of course, when you know something, to be true, when your heart knows something to be true, then it cannot be moved. But when your heart does not really know, then you have to use this filter. Say not sure. If you're really not sure about it. So we come back to feeling. Due to contact, we build up these feelings of like and dislike through our first impression, through our gathering of information. So every time that we see that we come into contact with that particular object, feeling arises. Depending on feeling, craving arises. Depending on craving, attachment. Depending on attachment, becoming. The whole process of dependent origination. And it all starts with our perception of things. It all starts with our view of things. That is why the Noble Eightfold Path, we start with the right view. We have to correct our view, to see things as they are. And how do we see it? All things are impermanent. All things do not have an essence. All things, when we grasp onto it, it is suffering. We're not grasping onto the object. We are grasping onto the identity that we have built, and that causes us suffering. The thing that we grasp to, that's the identity, that's permanent. The thing itself is impermanent. Whether it's feeling, whether it's rupa, object, whatever it is, they are impermanent. So reflect on what I say and practice when you remember, when you have the mindfulness. If you have done that, you've gained a lot of merit. First, by listening to Dharma, by straightening your view, by practicing, and with this merit, you want to get more merit by transferring your merit to your departed relative. So I'm going to chant the transference of merit. So when I'm doing it, mentally transfer the merit to your departed relatives. Yatha varivaha pura paripurinte sagaram evam eva ito dinam petanam upakapati citam patitam tumham kipam iva samijatu sapi purentu sankapa chandopanaraso yatha manijoti raso yatha Sapi tiyo vivajantu sabarogo vinasatu mate pavanvantarayo sukhi digayuko bhava piva tanasili sanicam buddha pacayino cataros dhamma danti ayuvano sukhang Balam bhavatu sabba mangalang rakhantu sabba devata sabba buddhanupavena satha soti bhavantu te bhavatu sabba mangalang rakhantu sabba devata sabba dhammanupavena satha soti bhavantu te bhavatu sabba mangalang Rakhantu sabba devata sabba sanghanu bhavena satha soti bhavantu te